What is loyalty worth in a sport where the past only weighs, but never defines a future? In the heart of Toronto, an unfinished dynasty is about to face its most decisive moment. An empire built over decades. A foundation that has begun to tremble. An empire of ice built on 4 pillars. But how long does a foundation last when one of them threatens to collapse? At the epicenter of one of the world's largest sports franchises, a question echoes through the empty corridors of Scotiabank Arena. What does it cost to replace the irreplaceable? Since 1967, the Toronto Maple Leafs have carried the weight of history on their shoulders. The most valuable franchise in the NHL, 13 Stanley Cups in their resume, and a 58-year drought that seems endless. An entire city that breathes hockey. A fan base that has sold out tickets for more than half a century, regardless of results. A devotion that transcends generations and is now on the edge of an emotional precipice. Elimination after elimination, pain after pain, years of high expectations and bitter realities. A weight that began before man reached the moon and seems as distant as reaching the stars. For nearly a decade, the Leafs have bet everything on their core four players. More than $40 million in salaries. A promise of greatness that, season after season, has transformed into playoff disappointment. Austin Matthews, the generational scorer. William Nylander, the unpredictable Swede. John Tavares, the captain who came home. And Mitch Marner, the local boy, assist prodigy, perhaps the most versatile of all. And now, with Marner heading to free agency, Toronto faces the first major rupture of this generation. A choice between keeping the core intact or redefining the franchise's future. Mitch Marner's story in Toronto doesn't begin on draft day. It begins in the streets of Thornhill, Ontario, less than 30 minutes from Scotiabank Arena. A boy who grew up idolizing the Maple Leafs, who drew the maple leaf in his school notebooks, who may now be living his final moments with the team of his heart. Hey, Leafs Nation, if you live the drama of this team like we do, subscribe now to the channel to not miss any chapter of this story. We are your exclusive source of behind the scenes that no other media shows. Activate the bell and be the first to know when the Maple Leafs fate changes, because believe it, it will change. Leave your light to strengthen our community of true hockey connoisseurs. The bomb exploded in recent weeks. After 5 wins in the last 6 games, securing a playoff spot and about to win their first Atlantic Division title, the spotlight turned not to the postseason, but to an uncertain future. The 2024-25 season finally seemed different. With 50 wins and a more robust offensive style, the Leafs built their best version since the formation of the Core Four, a team seemingly ready to break the playoff curse. Mitch Marner, 27, approaching 100 points for the 3rd straight year, is in the final year of his contract. A contract of $10.9 million per season that, according to sources close to negotiations, could jump to more than $14 million annually. The numbers don't lie. Since entering the league in 2016, Marner has accumulated more than 600 points. Only Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Nathan MacKinnon, and Nikita Kucherov have better offensive production during this period. A restricted constellation of superstars that defines the salary parameters of the market. Sportsnet insider Luke Fox revealed that general manager Brad Treliving has already considered trading Marner for Mikko Rantanen in previous negotiations. A clear sign that renewal is far from guaranteed. To complicate matters, the NHL salary cap is expected to increase in coming years, creating a favorable environment for players ending contracts. The perfect moment for Marner to seek the biggest deal of his career, possibly the last major contract before turning 30. With several franchises, Chicago, Utah, Seattle, Los Angeles, Carolina, ready to open their coffers for the talent of number 16, the Maple Leafs face a crossroads. Pay the price or lose one of the greatest talents in their recent history without compensation. For Leafs Nation, the scenario is devastating. Seeing Marner wearing another jersey would be like losing part of the identity built over the last 8 years. A homegrown talent, shaped by the system, who knows like no other the weight of representing the oldest team in the NHL. In the corridors of Scotiabank Arena, a silent war unfolds. On one side, Tavares, Marner's agent, known for tough negotiations and public pressure strategies. Tavares is no stranger to tense negotiations. In 2019, his aggressive strategy secured Marner a 6-year, $65 million contract, a value considered above market at the time. The message now is clear. There will be no discounts to stay in Toronto. On the other side, a management trapped between the pressure of an impatient fan base and the mathematical reality of the salary cap. The question no one dares ask aloud: what is loyalty worth in a franchise that hasn't won a Stanley Cup since before the space age? Brendan Shanahan, president of the Maple Leafs since 2014, faces perhaps the biggest dilemma of his tenure. It was he who oversaw the rebuild that culminated in the current Core Four. It was he who promised fans that patience would be rewarded with a dynasty. Meanwhile, the shadow of the next NHL salary cap increase completely changes the game. Teams with substantial financial space, such as Chicago and Utah, can establish a new standard for stars like Marner. A contract of $14 million for 8 years would represent more than 15% of the projected salary cap. A monumental bet for any franchise, especially considering that Matthews already occupies a similar slice of the Leafs' finances. Sources close to the player suggest there is an unhealed wound. Years of criticism after playoff eliminations have created a complex relationship between the athlete and part of the fan base. Marner never said it publicly, but close associates guarantee he hasn't forgotten the boos, criticisms, and disproportionate weight placed on his shoulders. Memory is long in hockey. In 2021, after being neutralized against Montreal, Marner was the main target of criticism. In 2022, against Tampa Bay, the story repeated itself. Even with consistent performances in the regular season, the narrative of disappears in the playoffs has haunted number 16 for years. Beyond the rink, there's a personal side. Toronto is Marner's home. It's where he built his life, his friendships, his identity. Abandoning all this is a price that no contract can calculate. Behind the scenes of the league, general managers are already starting the chess game. Kyle Davidson in Chicago, Bill Armstrong in Utah, Ron Francis in Seattle, all studying the salary map and projecting offers that can make Marner the highest paid player in their franchise's history. Scenario 1 is clear. Marner accepts a below-market value to remain in his hometown, breaks all franchise records, and ensures that no other player will wear number 16 in Toronto. In this path, Marner would join names like Daryl Sittler, Matt Sundin, and Wendell Clark in the pantheon of blue and white legends. A legacy for life, transcending statistics and contract values. An annual value around $11 million will allow the Leafs to maintain the core and still have flexibility for specific adjustments to the roster. A significant financial sacrifice for Marner, but one that could be compensated by the historical and commercial value of remaining as the face of the franchise. Scenario 2 is equally plausible. Marner moves to a more financially generous market, leaving a hole in the Leafs attack, but freeing up about $14 million in salary cap for Brad Treliving to work with. No player would replace Marner individually, but the distribution of resources could balance the roster in different areas. With $14 million, Toronto could seek an elite defender and complementary attackers to Matthews' style of play. The departure would force a tactical reinvention. The attack would no longer have the maestro who made the orchestra work, but could gain more unpredictability and depth. A calculated risk that depends on Treliving's ability to identify complementary talents in the market. And here enters the complexity of Toronto's financial puzzle. It's not just about Marner. John Tavares, captain and leader, is also seeking renewal. And young Matthew Knies, 22, represents the future that needs to be secured. The math is cruel. The Maple Leafs cannot keep Marner at $14 million, renew Tavares with significant value, and still guarantee a long contract for Knies. Someone will have to give, or someone will have to leave. Experts are unanimous. Performance in the playoffs will be the decisive factor. If the Maple Leafs finally overcome the first round and make a deep run, the pressure will be enormous to keep the group intact, no matter the cost. The Tampa Bay Lightning model echoes in Toronto's corridors. The Bolts kept their core at all costs, sacrificing depth, but were rewarded with 2 consecutive Stanley Cups. Could the Leafs follow a similar path? But if Toronto faces its 10th consecutive early elimination, the perfect scenario for a drastic renewal will be created. And Marner might be just the first domino to fall. Philadelphia's motto from the early 2010s serves as a warning. After years of competing, the Flyers tried to maintain their core for too long, resisting necessary rebuilding. The result was a decade of mediocrity that haunts the franchise to this day. The history of the Toronto Maple Leafs teaches us that some bets define generations. In 1967, the last title. In 2025, perhaps the beginning of a new era, with or without Mitch Marner. In the silence of an empty arena, memories echo. The first NHL goal. The magical multiple-point nights. The brilliant assist that lifted fans from their seats. Moments that built a connection transcending contracts and numbers. And you, Maple Leafs fan, what would you do if you were in Brad Treliving's place? Keep Marner at any cost? Or reinvent a franchise with new faces and a new core? The answer may not lie just in contract numbers, but in the question Toronto has been trying to answer for more than half a century. What is a Stanley Cup worth after 58 years of waiting? Leave in the comments your opinion on what will be the best decision for the Leafs' future. And don't forget to share this video with all fans who live this anguish with us. In the next episode, we'll unravel the John Tavares enigma. What is it worth to keep a captain when time begins to take its toll? Subscribe and you'll be the first to watch. When a legacy is at stake, what does loyalty cost? $8 million? $6 million? In Toronto, an incomplete dynasty needs to answer the most difficult question. What is it worth to rewrite history? Some men carry more than a letter on their chest. They carry the weight of an entire city's expectations. When does that weight become unsustainable? The price of leadership is never measured just in dollars. Sometimes it's measured in sacrifices. At 34, John Tavares faces the moment of truth. Continue being the captain of hockey's most valuable franchise, or discover that even legends have a price. July 1st, 2018. The day that changed the trajectory of the Toronto Maple Leafs. John Tavares, the boy who grew up in Greater Toronto dreaming of the blue and white jersey, finally came home after 9 seasons with the Islanders. The boy comes home, proclaimed the headlines. A signing that shook the foundations of the NHL. A statement of intent. The Maple Leafs would no longer be just promise. They would be powerhouse. A $77 million contract. A promise of leadership. A symbol that the Maple Leafs would finally be treated as a destination, not as a bridge to other dreams. October 2nd, 2019. Tavares receives the greatest honor a Maple Leaf can have. The letter C sewn on his uniform. The 25th captain in the franchise's centennial history. A responsibility that few can fully understand. Following in the footsteps of giants. A lineage that goes back to George Armstrong, Ted Kennedy, Dave Kean, Wendell Clark, Doug Gilmour, Matt Sundin. Men whose names echo on the ice of Scotiabank Arena. Men whose numbers were eternalized on the ceiling. But 7 years and 0 playoff series wins later, Toronto faces the moment of truth. With Marner in doubt, Matthew Knies emerging as a force, and the salary cap pressing, what is it worth to keep their captain? And at what price is John Tavares willing to stay? Tavares' story transcends hockey. It's a story of returning to origins, of family, of destiny. A man who chose to come home when the whole world was at his feet. Now, this same man may have to choose between staying home or accepting that some stories don't have happy endings. Hey, you understand that being a Leafs fan is a journey of ups and downs. Subscribe now to follow each chapter of this saga. We are the only channel that brings deep analysis beyond the cliches of traditional media. Activate the bell to never miss the news that could change the course of the franchise. And leave your like to show that Leafs Nation remains united even in the most difficult moments. The numbers don't lie. At 34, John Tavares is living one of the most productive seasons of his career. 38 goals, more than in his last contract year with the Islanders. A point per game, even with increased defensive responsibilities. To contextualize the feat, only 12% of NHL players maintain the pace of a point per game after 34. Few manage to evolve defensively when the physical body begins to take its toll. Tavares belongs to a rare category of athletes who transform experience into a competitive tool. In year 16, I've done very well in the league financially, Tavares recently stated. A simple phrase, but one that hides a complex truth about a man who has already accumulated more than $111 million in career earnings. There will come a time when this will be resolved and settled. Then I just go out and have fun playing. Diplomatic words that hide weeks of tense negotiations behind the scenes, according to sources close to the player. But time is relentless. Reflexes a millisecond slower. Recovery between games a little longer. Rebuilding the body after season more challenging. Realities that no contract can ignore. Internal sources confirm negotiations have begun, but with priority focus on the Marner case. Meanwhile, the captain waits, patient but not indefinitely. The initial numbers circulating behind the scenes are revealing. Toronto will be preparing an offer in a range of $6 to $7 million per season, a reduction of almost 50% compared to the current $11 million. A proposal that tests not only market value but emotional commitment to the franchise. The list of alternatives available in the market is short and uninspiring. Matt Duchene, Sam Bennett, Brock Nelson, P.O. Suter, Michael Granlund. None with Tavares' history, leadership, or identification with the city. To put in perspective, Bennett, 28, had his best season with 49 points. Nelson, more consistent, never surpassed 72 points. Duchene, the most talented of the group, carries a reputation of not being able to establish himself with a franchise. Replacing Tavares is not just about changing a player. It's rethinking the team's identity. Behind the scenes of the league, the Stamkos case echoes as a warning. The Tampa Bay captain, after winning 2 Stanley Cups, saw his valuation fall to $8 million per year in a state without state taxes. The comparison is inevitable. Stamkos, 34, just like Tavares. Long career with a single franchise, unlike Tavares. 2 Stanley Cups on his resume, something Tavares still desperately pursues. And yet, market reality imposed itself. In Toronto, where taxes are significantly higher, the math is relentless. Sources close to management indicate that the initial offer will be around $6 million per season, almost half the current value received by the captain. To contextualize, an $8 million contract in Florida is equivalent to approximately $10 million in Ontario, considering the tax burden. In other words, even if Tavares accepted $8 million to stay in Toronto, his financial sacrifice would be even greater than it appears at first glance. What few know is that the decision transcends hockey. With young children established in local schools and deep roots in the community, Tavares seeks family stability, a trump card for Leafs negotiators. More than a player, Tavares has become a pillar of the community. His charity initiatives, visits to children's hospitals, and presence at local events have created connections that go far beyond the rink. Abandoning this legacy is not a simple decision for someone who grew up dreaming of building it. Brad's living strategy is crystal clear to those who know the behind the scenes. Gain time with Tavares' extension to solve the bigger puzzle, Marner. With each passing day, the captain's negotiating power diminishes. Time runs against Tavares. The closer to July 1st, the start of free agency, the less of the player's bargaining power. Toronto knows this and uses time to its advantage. A risky strategy when dealing with a captain who sacrificed millions to come home 7 years ago. Meanwhile, other teams observe carefully. Vegas, always aggressive in the market. Detroit, rising with young talents. Minnesota, seeking leadership for its core. Pittsburgh, trying to maximize Crosby's final years. Options would not be lacking for Tavares if negotiations with Toronto fail. The ideal scenario for Toronto, a 3-year contract at $6 million per season. A dramatic reduction that would allow keeping Marner and securing Knies' future. This path would offer the Leafs unprecedented flexibility. Potentially, they could keep their core intact, add defensive depth, and still have room for mid-season adjustments. The dream of any general manager in an era of rigid salary cap. The realistic scenario, $7.5 million for 2 seasons. A middle ground that recognizes market value without excessively compromising future salary cap.